Good morning. Thank you for joining us. It's actually pretty considering that it's our first year back. And this is a nice turnout, so we're very happy to have so many people in the room with us. So hello. My name is Jasmine Edwards. For some of you who might not have met me, I guess I'm trying to shorten my life. I've been alive a long time. So I started out when I got my master's in therapeutic recreation. I was doing outpatient mental health at Metropolitan Hospital Center under HHC for New York City. Then I wound up at Incarnation Children's Center, which I was there for 20 years. I wound up becoming Director of Recreation and Volunteer Services. And that is a pediatric center or a nursing home that unfortunately closed last year due to low census with COVID and also HIV also just not becoming a prevalent diagnosis for kids, which is great for the children, but for us that left us unemployed. So in the meantime, I have become adjuncting at LaGuardia Community College in their therapeutic recreation program. And now I'm also at Lincoln College in their therapeutic recreation program. And I'm also the coordinator for interns. So a couple of you that have now that I've gotten a student to come to your facility, working on it, gotta get them to get up, the transport. She's on the transportation line, one Metro card, and I can get students there. I only have one. So that is what I am doing. I love being an educator. I love being a CTRS, and now I'm combining both. So I'm really happy.
And hi, I'm Jeff Schwartz. I have my little spiel, some of you may know, but previous to becoming a rec therapist, I was a private chef or a regular chef, and I became a private chef, working for one family, which afforded me the opportunity to have a lot of leisure time. And I joined a group called Team in Training, which does endurance events to raise money for leukemia research. I did 100-mile bike rides like Tahoe, Tucson, Honolulu, Austin. One day I was in an airport wearing my Team in Training t-shirt, and a lady came up to me and was like, "You're with Team in Training?" And I said, "Yeah." She's like, "I want to thank you for everything you do. My 5-year-old daughter has leukemia." And I'm like, thank a doctor, thank a nurse. Like, they're the ones that are really helping your daughter. She's like, "No, what you do is incredible to help us." And I joke that, the Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes that day. Something happened inside of me. I met this little girl, just a beautiful 5-year-old girl named Ashlyn, who told me that when she got into remission, she was going to get a bunny rabbit. So I kind of exchanged addresses. I went home. I bought the biggest stuffed bunny I could find. I sent it to her and just said, "Until you get the real one, here's one. I'm thinking about you." Became friends with the family. She's actually in college now. She's doing great. Nice. But something felt good. Besides cooking, just something felt good about helping this little girl. And so I looked for all the therapies, and TR just jumped out at me as the one I could do. I then did my internship at Incarnation Children's Center. I got hired during my internship. And when we closed, I now work at Rutland Nursing Home in Brooklyn, which is pediatric and young adult. We're phasing into just pediatrics and young adults. I work on the pediatric unit for fragile and rehab for pediatrics.
If we didn't say before, sorry, we are recording this session, so it's not a video recording, but there is an auditory recording. So any comments that you make will be, I guess, up forever on YouTube. Just putting that disclosure out there.
But that being said, we do want you to join in. It's just a conversational.
So we are going to talk about cultural competency in healthcare, and I am moving back so that people can see our different slides. For those of you who have come to our presentation, we kind of do a mixture of reading off the slides, and then we definitely want interaction. And I think the slides kind of get people more comfortable, but they do wind up sharing. And it's up to you. If not, we will share stories. So that's not the issue. So demographics are changing. This, America is a big melting pot. All different people look different. They have accents. They speak different. Their foods are different. We are a cultural melting pot. So cultural diversity is just a rising emphasis on evidence-based practice within healthcare has triggered dialogues regarding cultural competence among healthcare professionals. For those who are here, do you have a cultural competency training or workshop at your facilities? I know at Incarnation, we had an annual in-service that was doing. I see some. I could get asked for something like that.
It's like an annual thing that you just.
Yeah.
And it's like that, and it's like that in my facility, you know, it's the same thing. It's we were talking about it today, and because of COVID, I didn't even really have a group orientation, but they did give me a packet of however many million pages to read through, you know, so yeah, it's something that we feel has to be built upon, and it's very important for facilities to incorporate into their practices.
For New York State, they have a conference every year, but we also have more training.
That's right.
So some slides we might go through, but again, with changing demographics, we just want to talk about, given the complexity of multiculturalism, it is beneficial to understand cultural competency as a process rather than an end. So these trainings that we take as part of our orientation, it doesn't stop because we're constantly going to be working with people from different cultures, different socioeconomic backgrounds. We have a chart on what is, when we talk about culture, what are we referring to? And this is the charts, but I don't miss anything. We're talking language, actions, your customs, whether it's cultural customs, religious customs, and religion down here, values, institutions, your beliefs, the way your upbringing, your family values, your gender, your age, your ableness, so your disabilities, gender, and also sexuality.
So looking at this list, you yourselves are probably in a few of these different cultures. And the person sitting next to you may be in other cultures on this list, and there are other items as well that you'll be part of. So that it's that recognizing of the different cultures is very important.
So next, getting into also how we dress, the foods we eat. When we met the children that came to ICC, we did try to ask them what were their favorite foods. What foods? Jeff was our, he did the chef. He did our cooking foods because you did for.
We actually, with one of my interns, we actually did a group of food around the world. And so each resident would have a week, and we would have them pick a food from the country that they chose. And a lot of them chose the countries that they were from, which was fantastic. We also had them do a little presentation on a board of the things about their countries. And then we made the food, the item, and they got to discuss why they liked eating it or what they remembered about it. And it was just a great way to bring our residents and even myself, you know, into their culture and what they believed and what they liked. And it was just a fascinating, and they really got into it. They dressed up. It was just great to watch them really buy into it. It was fantastic. And just, but with this slide, with like an iceberg, you can only see what you see on top is minuscule compared to what the actual iceberg looks like. So what this is showing you, these are the things that we see on top, the things that we think of, the things that when you say culture, what you think of, but there is so much more going on under the surface of what we need to recognize and we need to learn in order to become better and more culturally competent in our own work.
So culture, health, and service to others. What is considered to be a health problem? Sometimes we find that, for instance, diabetes, when you are dealing with, my family is from Haiti. So in Caribbean culture, when you tell someone who's diabetic that they can't have starchy foods, a lot of sugar, so they're like, okay, so no candy, no chocolate, no cake, no cookies, and they're done. Plantains, like if they didn't have plantains in Haiti anymore, and a lot of there'll be a revolution. Like that is what I grew up on. So then to explain to my grandmother, the doctor, when I used to go for appointments and translate, that also I would ask the doctor, so we eat plantains, we eat yams, we eat yuca, and he's like, oh, that's like a potato, right? And I said, yes. He's like, yeah, she can't have. And my grandmother was now upset. When I first translated, she said, okay, no cake, no problem. This for her was her. So in the, the doctor didn't take into consideration her cultural needs. That for her, that is what he's also avoiding. And she was, but that's a whole other story about how she was not following that diet. So what does that mean in healthcare when we say, this is restricted? Do we assume that our clients understand? Because maybe in their culture, they, well, my grandmother just didn't consider plantains and She said that, okay, so no potato, but I can have plantains. That's okay. She would not consider that something different.
Right, or some cultures may have their own traditional medicines that are not the same as our Western medicines. And that's something where you have to see how you can make that work. They don't believe in some of our medicines or our practices.
We see that a lot with, we saw that a lot with mental health, right? Where it's, you know what, we need to have prayer, and we need to drink tea and have herbs, some shaking.
So I worked inpatient psych for many years, and we had a gentleman come in who was Amish, and the staff just had no idea what to do with this. So he comes in, and as it is, it's a social taboo for him, and it was huge. Like, he and his wife in a barn because he was very paranoid. It was this whole very traumatic thing for his family and his community. And at night, he was not going to sit in the day room and watch TV. He was not going to do all of these things that were very normative, right, in the milieu. And he was going in his room, and he was not turning the lights on, and he was sitting by the window, reading his Bible, minding his own business. And there was all this, oh, he's isolating, he was this and he's that. And I'm like, but is he? I was like, this gentleman should be at home right now, like with a gas lamp on. This is not that he's isolating. This isn't symptomatic. Like, you're asking him to come out of his culture because it makes you comfortable. And he ended up going down to Lancaster to an inpatient, Amish-run inpatient facility. But there was a lot, that was a very big thing in the hospital kind of in that moment about how we were treating this gentleman and how we did need to treat him different. And that wasn't a symptom of his illness, like that was just his life. And forcing him to come out of that so that we could say he was better is just not, it just made no sense.
Right, what is better on our terms is not necessarily their terms.
Yeah, absolutely. Great example, because the norm would be if someone is in their room with the lights off and just sitting reading their Bible.
But they're isolating.
Absolutely isolating, you're concerned, major depression, so many things, so that's wrong.
However, I want to just play devil's advocate as a personal experience, because my daughter has type 1 diabetes. And when she was younger, she was diagnosed when she was 3. And when she was younger, if she would start acting out, I would say, is this the diabetes or is this you being 4 or 5 or whatever? So I would always make her test her blood sugar to see where she was before I would either reprimand her or punish her or what have you. Because again, you can also use your illness or your disease, as a scapegoat or a crutch to do things that, you shouldn't be doing. So we also have to be, aware of that as well.
So cultural competence, when we say that, what is it? So cultural competence, the definitions that I can find, is becoming the best phrase in the healthcare field. And, thank you. Academic institutions, healthcare facilities, service providers, governmental agencies across the country are focusing on developing cultural competence to address healthcare disparities and create health equity. Cultural competence programs have been designed to sensitize health providers to the special needs and vulnerabilities of different populations with the goal of providing accessible and appropriate care and services. This is a technical term that I have gotten from our healthcare facility, and which we're getting from the Department of Health, and I think it's similar to what a lot of places are probably calling cultural competency. Just want to share that with everyone. And then, guess where I got this from? Because of course, when I'm, in putting slides, I'm like, Jeff, is this like, are other places doing this? Is it now new? He's like, well, let me just see it in NCTR. I'm like, oh my God, and just, here we go. So, foundational knowledge number 12. And thank you for that. So this is where it came from. I cannot take credit. Cultural competency is, for example, social, cultural, educational, language, spiritual, socioeconomic, age, and environment is required for competence practice by therapeutic recreation facilities. And then ACTRA. They also have, which we are going to go, this is their, I'm going to skip to the bottom. ACTRA promotes diverse and inclusive participation by its leaders, members, and affiliates. So this is what ACTRA has listed. And for those who were with us yesterday, this goes back to principle 4. Actually, we have 10 principles. This was principle 4, and it's recreation therapy personnel are responsible for ensuring that individuals are served fairly and that there is equity in the distribution of services. Individuals should receive services without regard to their race, color, creed, gender, sexual orientation, age, disease, disability, social, and financial status. The point of those slides is to show you that we're in a line, ATRA and CTRC, and hopefully your facilities, with what is under.
And your own personal ethics as well.
And we're gonna have some interactive, so just, we're gonna give you the slides, we have 90 minutes, so we're gonna make sure that we get into everything, but this is more on what exactly is cultural competence, the set of values, behaviors, attitudes, and practices. No matter what trainings we can do, your belief systems, like even you can walk out here today and say, yeah, Jasmine, like this, yeah, not agree. We can't change your thoughts. And for those are people, your supervisors, our students, then how you also your views are going to affect your staff members. And then that trickles down to your clients. So what is your awareness of one's own cultural identity and your views about differences and the ability to learn and build upon knowledge? I tell my students in class, how do you identify? Culturally, sexually, and I don't have to put them on the spot to say, just if they're not comfortable. If they're comfortable, some people will jump in and share. If they're not, I just say, just think as I'm talking, how do you identify? And do you recognize that not everybody identifies as you? Do you feel accepted by people? Have you ever not feel accepted by people? How does that make you feel? Because when you're going out and doing these internships, you feel accepted by your supervisors, by the staff. So I have, so this is the same question.
And I'm sure that everyone who have your cultures, I'm sure that you have been in a position or a place where you have felt like you are in the cultural minority of something. And, being a man in healthcare, I am the cultural minority and I understand it. And going into ICC, where I was the only person in recreation when I got there, and in administration, I was one of 2 men in the administration world, and maybe one of 10 men in the entire building when I started. I was in a cultural minority, and it was an adjustment for me to have to work, and I'm sure an adjustment for the women that I work with, and I have a fantastic boss that I work with. But still, and I'm sure that you have all been in some places that you're in a cultural majority, but also when you felt in the minority as well.
So cultural humility is a term that we use a lot with students and with professionals. And it's acknowledging one's own knowledge is limited as to what we know about another's culture. So I tell students, we do our intake for our assessment. We ask for language, the primary language and the secondary language. There are times where I've never heard, I don't know, the country that they're from, where I probably learned that in geography. I passed, I got my high school diploma. I'm not good with history and geography. I just needed to pass to graduate. I did that. I went to college. I don't remember, honestly, a lot of where places are geographically located. Google can be your best friend, what I say to this. Google, learn what language do they speak, what foods do they eat. And then you've got the. So that's just something to think about. Is what do you do when you do your assessment and you have someone who speaks a different language, and there is no other staff in the building who speaks that language. So again, practicing cultural humility is to increase one's self-awareness of their own biases and perceptions, and engage in a lifelong self-reflection process. Lifelong. Well, I guess until maybe retirement, then if you retire, so it's a lifelong reflection process about how to put these aside and learn from your clients. Sometimes we have to put our cultural biases to the side. Can you do that? What happens when you're at work and you see a staff person who can't?
Right, and we had that when we were at our old facility, We had a resident that was transitioning from a she to a he, and so he identified as him, and I now still call him he. And from what I know, he has still not gone through with it, but and in the process, he said, I'm not going to go through with the surgery yet, but I still want to be known as he, which is fine. I've accepted that. We had a lot of staff that had a lot of difficulty with that. And still call him her, and we would have to, he's a he, this is what he is expecting and wanting. But again, that was in his world, that was how he wanted to be, and his culture was, I am a man. And it was a very difficult process for a lot of our staff of certain cultures. I'm not going to call anybody out. But it was a process, and it was a long-term process that even by the time we left, some people were still having difficulty with it.
Because it was cultural, it was about the culture, it was about religion for some people. But God says that you're a male or a female, and that's it. There's the two choices, and there's no other choice. And that was some for some people. Mostly from it was also just a religious, so that can be hard as well.
I think sometimes we make it about ourselves too, it's like, oh, I'm old, I don't understand this newfangled thing, like, how could you be a woman when you're really a man, and I'm old, and you just have to accept the way I feel.
There were less that was said that way. I'm old with gas, I'm old school, this is what I was brought up, so this is why I say it this way, and they wanted to be excused. Yes.
But again, we're serving at our client's pleasure. They're not serving at ours. So it doesn't, how I feel is not important. Anything that I do, it's how you feel and how I am making you feel or how others are making you feel. That's my job.
So, for those who like stats, I'm not going to go through the stats, but I will keep them up. In the United States, about 13% of the population, or approximately 40 million people, are foreign born. So in healthcare, just think about it. So it's the only stat that I can go through.
And plus with, obviously back in the day, we were more nation centric, but now the world, it's an international world. There are patients that come from other countries just to America for our medicine. And, so those are important. We have to make them feel comfortable. We have to make them feel like they're culturally important.
In healthcare, health disparities, differences in health due to social or economic disadvantages based upon membership in their social group. So access to health care. They may not have the resources in their communities. That was mentioned about Amish having to be transferred to another facility where he could be treated. Also, just Medicaid and private insurance. Medicaid versus private insurance, going to get a better quality. It unfortunately is the way it is. Many people are affected by health disparities, such as racial and ethnic minorities, immigrants and undocumented persons, women, children, and the elderly, the LGBT community, and people with disabilities. So we're working on it, and we've come a long way. I don't want it to seem so negative. We definitely have come a long way, but remember, this should be a lifelong process that we continue to realize that there are health disparities, and how can we continue to lessen the gap? The gap was much, 100 years ago, it was a horrible gap, and we have definitely come a long way. That should be recognized, and we can still continue to narrow that gap.
I asked a question. So the health disparities, is it a combination, do you think, in your judgment, a combination of individuals' values and customs and the healthcare system? Because there are certain cultures that don't believe in going for healthcare or, mental illness treatment or that sort of thing. So do you see, how is that breakup, do you think?
I think that is an issue with an outreach, is where we're employing so many different employees of different backgrounds and cultures, learning about our own employees and what languages they speak, what cultures they're from, so they're working in healthcare, and I hope that they believe in the practice of the healthcare, medicine, and our own practices. Are they willing to engage in outreach? Are they to bring them, accompany them along with you to the communities? Like, and I know they did that for COVID in the African American community. They felt that people were not trusting the vaccine. And what they were then, community leaders were going to churches and speak. They did that in my neighborhood. I live in a Caribbean neighborhood, and people were very skeptical about the vaccination. And they were coming to the church, and they were even, I said, listen, I live in a neighborhood just like you. I grew up here. And they were saying that my culture is similar to yours. And they were sharing their stories of why, and just giving stats and facts, and still addressing that, yeah, I know culturally my family is from, and I understand, and we believe that we can put the herbs and the teas. I mean, there was a whole, this is the remedy. You mix this tea together with these herbs. And that's what people were culturally sharing in the Caribbean neighborhood. So they had people come and speak, and that made a difference where some people were willing, and then some were like, no, that's not the way we do it. So the next slides are more, these are reflective. And what you know, if you want to share, that is great. But where do you fall when it comes to your cultural awareness? So we have, and I actually have gotten this from a textbook that I use. Cultural destructiveness. This is on the extreme end of a cultural competency, the extreme opposite. Intentionally deny, reject, or outlaw another culture. You assume that one culture is superior and should impose their values or eradicate lesser cultures. You work with someone who maybe is culturally destructive.
Hopefully you don't.
Jeff, you want to solve
Cultural incapacity. I accept the existence of other cultures, but they're unable to work with them effectively. They have subtle messages that make people feel not welcome.
So that's the age. I'm old, it's male or female, this is where I grew up, so I'm just gonna call you.
Just deal with it.
Just deal with it.
You know.
So that is that, they're not willing. Cultural blindness. Assume that all people are basically alike and use a universal approach to services. For so just the man is, he's Amish and he's eating in the dark. So just assuming that's not what people are supposed to do. You show the light on. This is the norm. Ignoring cultural differences and strengths.
And then this is where we start to get into what we should be and what we're striving to become. Cultural sensitivity. You're willing to learn about and understand other cultures. You're aware and you're open to acquiring information about other cultures and peoples. You want to get that information. You want to learn who they are. You want to learn what they like, what they eat, what they care about, because you're going to use that in your programming, in your treatment to help them achieve their goals.
Then we move into, this is a great level to be. And remember, supervisors, managers, directors, it's not just for you, also for your staff and your interns, your students, to help them to get to the cultural sensitivity level, and then even continue up to cultural competence, the ability to work effectively in cross-cultural situations. There's an expansion of cultural knowledge and resources.
And then it goes right up to the cultural proficiency, where you're proactive in promoting cultural diversity. And you're always seeking to increase the knowledge and the cultural competent practices of yourself, your programs, your facilities.
Does anyone do cultural programming? They fall under any kind of cultures, or maybe religious or activities that bring awareness to other residents about other cultures and other religions?
Yeah, so I once worked at a residential treatment facility, and so we, at one point, some of our other residential staff decided that they would do a cooking or baking on a weekly basis, but do like maybe for different cultures or different regions of the world. And so they would bring in different recipes and different ingredients from those different regions and bake or cook whatever dish that they decided to find. So it would give the youth that were there a chance just to have a taste of different areas and ethnic and cultural areas.
And food is always an easy way to get people to come. We all know this. When I was an intern, they were like, what group do you want to do? Cooking, you know, and of course I had the whole facility in my group every single week. So I'm with you on that.
I was always a favorite when it came to baking.
I also worked in an RTF and I'm Jewish, and so I started and I was like fresh out of college, ready to go. I'm like, yeah. And up comes Easter, and I don't know anything about Easter, and so I YouTubed it. I'm like, great. And so we dyed all the eggs. I put a teen in charge. I'm like, yeah, I'm killing it. It's awesome. And then I threw out the eggs because that's disgusting. And then there was a revolt because the kids wanted to eat the eggs, and I was like, why would you eat the eggs? You dyed them. And so it was a shift change, and it walks one of the like, really good staff members, and she's like, why do all the kids hate you right now? And I was like, I threw out the eggs, and apparently that's wrong. She's like, why did you throw out the eggs? And I was like, because it's disgusting. What are you doing? So I had to do it again. And so they let me get over that and get over to Christmas, where I butchered it again. I cannot figure out how to put up this fake Christmas tree. And I've messed everything up multiple times. I'm like in tears. The kids are coming home from school. They're like, what's wrong? I was like, I don't know how to do the Christmas tree. So then they were like, can we celebrate Hanukkah? And I was like, what? They're like, well, you know about Hanukkah, then Easter is coming around again. And I was like, do you guys want to stay there? And they were like, yes. And so they actually requested cultural competency for me because they watched a disaster of a year occur.
That's fantastic.
There's so much more open.
Yeah.
Kids are inherently curious, right? They're inherently, like, they want to know and they want to experience. And it's so eye-opening to watch kids be like, oh, that's awesome, right? I want to do that. Because they haven't had the time and exposure to develop the kind of biases that we all inherently have. So we have bias, but they're all like, why? That's just cool. It's just different. Like super cool. Yes. Let's different decorations. Decorations are cool. Like, that's neat.
Let's eat dyed eggs.
And I used an alternative radical Seder, which is used by like the LGBTQ community, that has a lot of passages about everyone being included at the table. Because I knew nobody at the table was Jewish, so I didn't want the Seder to be like, Jewish people only. So it was very much like a Seder plate that had an orange on it because the orange is different and now included and allowed. And lots of other cool things. And so like the whole like hour-long Seder was all about inclusiveness and bringing people together. So they loved it. They like ate it all up. Yeah.
And I'm sure it's, like you said, children are inherently, or kids are inherently open to things. And I'm sure it gets more difficult as you go up in population age, where you are more set in your ways. You know, and we all, you know, when we were talking, we all have our own beliefs and we all have our own, not superstitions, but what's the word I'm looking for?
Your values and your
Of what you believe other cultures are like, and stereotypes. Sorry, thank you. We all have our stereotypes. You know, listen, myself included. I'm not perfect in any way. So yeah, we do have those, and we are taught those. But are we able to put those aside and say they may not be correct, and I am willing to learn what it is that you believe, and say I was wrong. I totally judged it the wrong way, and I have now a new understanding and a new understanding of just who you are and what you are. And I think we can learn from the kids of being able to just be open-minded and allow new facts and new information to come to us. And I get that working from kids all the time, so it makes sense.
I think also it's important that, this is coming from my daughter, who's, you know, she's a college student, and obviously, you know, we want to raise a person in the community, and so her friends depend on her to teach them about cultural differences. She's like, it's not my job to teach you to be culturally competent. You need to go do the research. So I think it is important that we learn from our clients, but I also think it's important that we as, you know, just general humans, take the time to learn about the different cultures and not depend on, you know, the person of color that I'm friends with or the Hispanic person that I'm really close with to have them teach me about their culture. I think it's up to us to really learn about their culture as well.
And I think it's also up to us to keep each other honest.
Yeah.
And to say you should be doing this as well. This is not just me. And together we make this into a better place and a better program by doing that, by keeping your coworkers honest and your under workers honest and your overworkers honest. You know, I think it becomes a team process.
Yes. Okay. So we talked about health disparities. There's differences in health due to health. All right. Okay. Steps to developing your personal cultural competency. You have to recognize, be honest with yourself about, you know, what your biases, your stereotypes, where you fell in the cultural chart, whether it's destructive or it's proficient or you're somewhere in the middle. So that means your personal cultural biases and your perceived ideas. You have to have a desire, and Jeff has mentioned that a few times, like the children, just inherently wanting to learn about other different cultures. And then you need to seek out, not just relying on someone to explain it to you, but you know, do research, speak to more, ask questions. You have questions about someone's culture, instead of waiting for them to explain, then seek out more. What do you want to learn? What are you interested in? You can Google, you can research, so much is available to you. Develop a culturally competent communication and interpersonal skills. How do you communicate with someone in a different language? You just kind of give up, or you know, what is it that you do? So I know the facilities, they have translators. We have the number that you dialed in. Always that great. You
Yeah.
dialed in.
We have now,
The language line.
right, we have our facility now has that, but we also have a mobile iPad that we can now log into, and there's the list of languages that we can log into is phenomenal. So
to get one from ASL on its video, it was incredible.
It was good.
Oh, it was so good.
Really?
So good.
Yeah.
So this guy put all of his groups, all of his treatment groups like in front of his computer. So the group leader and he would sit next to each other so that the interpreter could see and hear us, but he could see the interpreter. And it was amazing, because it's literally one of like 3 times I've seen it, like the way
I've never seen that. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
And is this a fee, like you subscribe or?
No, we were at a state, like 1H facility. I don't know how they, it was amazing.
Albany Medical Center is the same one.
I think New York State has a.
That sounds great.
Language line and that. Yeah. Have the phone interpretation services, but they also have it.
and I have a 4-year-old Chinese girl, only speaks Mandarin. She does speak goofiness because she did laugh at me the other day. But when I go in there, I have on my phone my Google Translate, and it speaks for me. So because I don't want to mispronounce something, because to me that's insensitive culturally. And I've now learned some Mandarin that I can now say it to her in my own voice, which I think connects you more than just hearing it off the phone. But I can say things like "Good morning," and I'll say her name. How are you today? Can you smile for me? You know, and but I get to do that because of technology. Technology is fantastic to help us connect with each other. I also have families that they may speak a little bit of English, but they prefer communicating in Mandarin or Spanish or some other language. I'm just using those two because those are the 2 families that I work with. And the phone that I have, he can send me it in Mandarin, and all I hit is translate on the app, and it translates it right there for me, so I can see what he's saying, and I can reply to him, and it translates it back to Mandarin for me. And it's being culturally sensitive to his needs. I'm not going to make him speak English, which he's not comfortable. He can do it, but it's just not comfortable for him. And there may be a miscommunication. There may be something that happens that's not what I'm intending. So I'm going to make him feel comfortable with us. And I know they're very thankful for it. And because I called him and we talked on the phone, he's like, can you do me a favor? Can we just do this in text? Absolutely. And so I'm understanding that the language barrier is a little bit uncomfortable for him. And that's not my intention. So the use of technology has been very helpful for me, at least, to help my clients feel more comfortable.
Apps, Google, all that stuff. Great. So, know the cultural characteristics of your patient population, wherever you're working, included. What cultures are predominantly represented in your TR programs? What factors might affect the leisure, motivation, and the interests of your culturally diverse clients? And what kinds of leisure activities and experiences and attitudes are particular to different cultures? Do you take this into consideration when you're doing? Really with the slide we just lost. And it's great because it gives you new ideas for programming. So we had the chart before the iceberg, and we just put that out as your, and remember back to what we looked at when we're talking about cultural variables. This is, let's just repeat this. And meeting the cultural and linguistic needs of our clients. Talks about that. And mentioned about the DSL interpreter. So they're different. So this is great that you have these in the facilities. And maybe if you don't, maybe you can suggest some of these available, some of these resources. All right. So in rep for us, I don't know about you in the facilities, we did all the decorating. A lot of this time. When you're decorating, we actually took cultural competency, cultural considerations into effect. Not just for putting everything, we were very much most of the staff, I'd say, would fall under the Catholic faith, but Jeff is not. So, we decorated for Christmas at least, we did Hanukkah, Christmas, we did it all. And the children actually loved it. They loved seeing the menorah, they loved the different faith, the Kwanzaa, they enjoyed that. So, do you consider that when you're doing things up on the wall, even helping them with decorating their rooms? Just having the kids come to our office and print out the flag of the country, just something in place so that they can use this as art for their room instead of what we have. Typical track, they had a poster board in their room that they could put whatever they wanted on. And it was good and bad because some put gang things. That is a culture, as they argue, but some culture. It is gang, what do they call it, gang culture, right? And it's like, okay, well, yes, and I don't want to infringe upon your culture, but we are a gang free and drug free because then we got pictures. I learned a lot about the different drugs and marijuana and the different what they're called. That to me looks like candy, and then I sit there like, you should. I had no idea. I'm innocent. I'm like, is this candy? They have Skittles, like, and I'm like, oh, that's Skittles, and they're like, no, see.
Yeah, the concoctions that they made, I mean, all sorts of things, fascinating.
You're old.
Like he showed me a pack of Skittles. I think the one letter was like spelled
Yes.
different. I thought it was just trying to be cool.
With a Z or
And
something.
the Z,
yeah,
and
Skittles
they're
with a Z.
like, no, it has the Z if there are Skittles, it's drugs. I'm like, great, that's.
And a big poster on their wall.
So,
I just want to say also in our facility and probably in a lot of facilities, recreation is in charge of the visitation. So what we have done instead of, and initially we had to go downstairs and meet every family and come back up and it was, oh my gosh. So we now have them come up after they check in, but we have visitation pointing them where to go but it's in 5 different languages on our wall. So it's in English and it's in Mandarin and I forgot the language that for India. Yes, and it's and Arabic also, and it's everywhere we go. It's those languages, and because we're being culturally competent, we're being culturally sensitive. That they're not gonna, just to say go this way doesn't mean anything if you don't understand what it's saying. So that's just something that we in recreation do to make our clients also still feel comfortable and welcome.
yes.
So I have something a little bit different, very small. I know this deaf person. So every time it comes around, is it okay? She always says yes, but I always make sure I ask her, when we have church services, she helps us bring people, and I'm like, stay. So very interesting for me.
But that's great that she has the autonomy to tell you
Yeah.
that you give her that open forefront that you don't have to. And she can make it, she said no, and we talk about it. And you make it open for her and acknowledge. Sometimes just being acknowledged is all people want. That they just want to be acknowledged, that you understand that they are, don't feel like I have
You don't have, you don't have to conform to us. And we have the same thing. We just did a goodbye party for one of our nurses, and someone asked, "Where's this person?" And someone else was like, "They're Jehovah, they don't do the partying." Like, and everyone was like, "Oh, okay." You know, it was nice to see that there was no like, "Oh, like why," or bickering about it. It was okay, and that made me feel good about where I work and the team that I work with, that no one gave her a hard time about it. So.
Another employee was able to do like this amazing Christmas party. And we'll get after holiday. She said, "I can't come." So like changed it to the staff appreciation party, just so she could come.
But that's great that you changed to make someone else feel included. That's fantastic.
And then, so the pamphlets are just, I know Jeff talked about the signs, do they have at your facility? And maybe, you know, it's not necessary because English is what everyone is able to, at this facility just has a mixed population. So you always want to try to conform to, you know, you want the least restrictive environment. So you know that you have a strong population, it's a building population. And speak to your administrators, because sometimes they're not even aware. I think that that's what happens, and then you bring it to their attention. And of course, if you say, you know, if you want to be the DOH moms, want to be culturally competent, you know, in our facility, when you said anything about, I think DOH would appreciate it, our administrator was on it.
The ears perked up.
Because he then, when DOH came, he's like, so we implemented a new program. He wanted to show it off. Yeah, so we learned how to, you know,
Get what we wanted.
the right lingo, like DOH would just love to see that we're doing all this cultural competence. We had to be trained on the staff that the relay calls, we kind of mentioned that, so I don't know if, for the hearing impairment, if anybody has experience with working with the hearing impairment in their facility, or even with the geriatric population, they kind of, so how do you do that? Groups and programming, etc.
We actually, in the past at NCTRC, we had certificates call us with the hearing impaired, you know,
TTYD.
yes. And it would be interesting because you're so apt to, when you're talking to the person that's going to interpret the other side, say, you know, they or he or she, but it really should just be talking directly to them, right? Because you're really talking to the person on the other side through the person. But it's really easy to just say, yeah, so just tell her that she needs to do X, Y, and Z instead of just saying, you need to do X, Y, and Z, you know? So just to really even pay attention to that when you're talking through an interpreter, just in general.
Yes.
You know, even I work one day a week for my ex-bosses, like when I was a private chef. His mother is now 97. She lives in an assisted living. I go once a week to hang out with her, to help her with whatever I've been doing it for years. She's become hard of hearing, and the closed captioning is on, and she gets upset. It's, again, sensitive to her, but the closed captioning, they place it where they want, and it's covering the screen, or it's covering the rolling bottom of the news or something, and she's like, I can't even see what it says. It's culturally insensitive to her needs. It's nothing I can fix it, but you know, except I can tell her what's going on or yell at what's going on. But you know, it makes me think, like, you know, these are needs that other people have, that it's, you know, trying to become sensitive to what they want.
So how are you meeting your cultural and linguistic needs of your clients? Think about that. And your students, your volunteers, and your interns. Do you train them? So are they getting the same training that you are, your students and volunteers and interns? And for your competencies for TR professionals, knowledge of your population, acceptable social behaviors, when to handshake, that's a hug. I don't know if it was COVID, but even before COVID, some cultures, especially the male therapist, hugging a female resident, that was always sensitive. In the rooms, we always had issues with the rooms. I remember when Jeff was an intern, don't let those girls suck you into coming into their rooms and help them put something up, or because culturally we didn't have a lot of men working there. So, and our girls were they're teenage girls, and they were promiscuous, and I always, the male interns, and, Jeff took it well, but some of my interns would look at me like, wait, what? I'm like, I just always stand outside the door. But I see females go in, you just don't, and it is different culturally for a man going into a female room than vice versa, women going into a male resident room. And just, I said, we're gonna have a hard time with administration, so which I know is not equal, and you're shaking your head, but that's just, it just wasn't, as I said to them, it's not equal. I can go into the male residence room and I won't get as much whack as you going into. If there's any kind of accusation, so just, have you had that experience?
Yes, yeah, I did. I work in long-term care, and it was a dementia resident who just lost her son. And I went in, and it was COVID, so I was socially distanced even for that. And I said, I'm so sorry, empathy, and everything. And I left, and I had COVID. I caught COVID, unrelated to. But I was out for a week, and DOH came in, and they went to her, and they said, so how's your treatment here? And she said, oh, they're lovely. Jim in recreation came in when my son died. He rubbed my back. He massaged my shoulders. He was lovely.
Oh my
He would
goodness.
come into the room at night and everything. So.
I think you weren't there for the week.
Yes, yeah, they were like, yeah, he hasn't even been here for a week, so, this
Thank
is-
God, and I'm sorry that you contracted COVID, but that kind of was your saving grace.
It was part of the saving grace, yeah, yeah, and it's, from then on, it's in the door, and again, I knew that. I knew not to, go into I knew not to do these things, but you just get into the routine of doing it, but, yeah.
I think sticking with
Thank
that,
you for sharing that.
I think sticking with that point, I don't think it matters if it's a male or female going into a teenager's room or someone with dementia's room, because you have no idea what their memory's gonna be, but you don't know what their preferences are or how they're gonna flip the situation, because if you're working in a mental health institute, like that does sometimes just affect the way that they decide to change the story, right? So when I worked in an RTF and I worked in RTC, I just didn't go into bedrooms, like I never was alone, because there's no reason for that, like, if you
Right.
need me, come on out here. That's your private space. No one has to go in there. You have your privacy in there. You don't have privacy anywhere else. That's your space.
And we always told our
We
people,
flipped it to empowering space for them, where other people aren't gonna come in unless like you want to be tucked into bed, like whatever, But like otherwise, that's your private space. We're not going in there. Because I'm female, you're female, it doesn't matter,
So that is the culture of the facility, because at our facility, they actually encourage for us to go in and meet them. So this is their environment, they're comfortable with their rooms. So we had mental health techs when I first started, and then they decided recreation is so good at this. They got rid of the mental health techs. And they brought in our psychiatrist, who was wonderful, to always just supervise us on a weekly basis. And they were like, we are not gonna hire, because the mental health techs, there have been issues, we have to then bring in new people, and rec, you have all been, you guys have great with interventions. They have sent us to trainings, so it's great, went to a lot of trainings, but they just decided mental health, recreation / mental health. That is the way they change our training. So then they said, if you're comfortable, if a child is in distress and they're in their safe space, which is their room, to go into their safe space, and that became the culture of ICC, and so that was the culture that was expected.
but still, that's something you have to weigh, whether
Yeah.
you're okay with that or comfortable with that.
So this is all different types of culture.
And plus, for privacy's sake, we also we had a Muslim girl, always has to have her head covered. And so, right, but going into her room, when she's alone, she doesn't have to. So again, I had to be sensitive when I knocked on her door and all of those things to make sure that I was being sensitive and not violating her religious beliefs and things like that. It was just something I was always very cautious of to make sure that I was keeping her beliefs in my respect.
I was just gonna say, I listening to your point about when a resident is in crisis, we're encouraged to go individually into the room. I think this is where competence and safety can sometimes come into conflict. And we have to just be pretty cognizant of what that involves. I mean, going one-on-one to someone's room in crisis is not a good position to put yourself in, right? So just kind of recognizing that, yes, we want to be culturally competent, but we also have to maintain the safety of the patient, of ourselves, and of our colleagues. And I think that sometimes that aspect of cultural humility gets overlooked in our desire to be so accommodating. We lose sight of that, side of things, because this patient is Hindi or French or Canadian or whatever it is, doesn't mean it can't be a violent or aggressive individual. And we have to kind of recognize all of those cultural dimensions in that.
And we would try to bring them to a place with a camera or with other people that were nearby. You know, you could still do your one-to-one, but there were other people within, yelling distance that they could come if need be. Tried. It wasn't always successful, but, you do your best with the situation
We're
that
two
you're in.
dangerous animals, right? I mean,
The children had their rules and the trainings that we did for crisis intervention, that helped us to feel more comfortable. I don't think without those trainings, without our psychiatrist really was just great in how he helped us with intervention, that it gave us that comfort level. Otherwise, we wouldn't have preferred anyone.
Different facilities, like so I work in 4-H, and I think that different populations, there's like a on our approaches for that.
But the facilities,
Right, so skilled nursing versus behavioral health, and then within each facility, there's like a program has its own like values and things around knowledge. I oversee a 50-bed program that's living to each floor has its own temperature. Yes, like how they're like, oh, when a patient comes in, they go in COVID isolation now for 3 days, which is actually pretty cool. It gives us time to get to know them. And then we have to decide like which unit they're gonna go to and which of those like cultures and treatment modalities. Within it. So it's interesting to me. You're completely different skilled nursing, right? Which is like completely out of my wheelhouse. It's totally different than how inpatient versus outpatient, right? There's so many nuances.
And culture is very fluid. It's never static. It's staying the same. When a resident leaves or a new resident comes in, it wipes everything out, and you have to now relearn the new culture of the facility.
Because everybody shows up with their stuff.
Correct.
Yeah.
And your reaction to the new person and the resident's reaction to the new person. I have someone that actually came with me to my new facility from my old facility. And when she doesn't have friends, she's a different person than when she has a friend. And she completely changes who she is. And I actually have 2 residents that came with me. And the other one, and they both do the same thing actually to each other. When they make a new friend, they cut the other one out. And they both come to me and they're like, I don't like her, she doesn't like me. And, but,
I'm an 11-year-old that living that.
but they're in their 20s. Yeah, but it's the culture. Everything changes.
But they also, depending on the type of facility too, there's this unfortunate element of safety trumps all. Kind of regardless, and that can be a really crap situation, because if you have someone whose culture just really dictates like no touch from the opposite side, so all of these things sometimes like you find yourself in crisis situations where it has to trump everything, and then ideally afterwards you can rebuild that relationship and establish that rapport and have that conversation. But it's hard. Especially if you know the person going in, you know like we're gonna have to cross lines here that we really, under normal circumstances would cross, right? And then you have to kind of work to reestablish that relationship afterwards and have that conversation, and it can be really difficult, especially if the person's feeling very disrespectful.
Right, and even with food, we can have cultural issues within the facility. Someone comes in, has a tree nut allergy, a severe tree nut allergy, and now peanut butter is gone from the facility. And
That's how it's supposed to.
oh my God, the uproar that we had to deal with because there was no longer peanut butter, but it was important because even the smell of peanut butter was something that could trigger this resident. And so we now have to train our residents about cultural sensitivity. And again, everyone, usually when you tell one of our kids culture, they're thinking your background
Right.
and teaching them that there are different definitions of culture. So even that was just a cultural shock to our facility.
Did the other people know who had the nut allergy, or were you able to do it where it was just general?
We do it in general, but they're smart. I mean, kids are smart. And when the new person comes in and we have to take out peanuts,
Because it's like yesterday we could have peanut butter and jelly, now we can't, now we're having
almond butter, or because she was only peanut allergy, it was only a peanut allergy.
We had some other butter and the kids are, I don't know, their palates are amazing. They knew the difference, so we didn't really announce
We did right.
had past problems. We just thought, let's just switch to this nut butter, whatever, butter, almond butter. And they knew, and there was no hiding it, so, and they were like, they knew it was the last kid in. We were only 21 beds.
That poor kid.
So we're not getting more than one admission.
I will say that kid was a very strong-willed kid, and turned out to be like the queen resident of the facility, and no one had a problem with it.
Yeah.
But again, that was the culture that she created when she came in. It was just fascinating to watch each individual make a new culture in society, our society.
So personal environment. It's our responsibility for our recreation professional to help make their personal with their rooms. We could decorate their rooms, help decorate their rooms, and we decorated their rooms. We were sensitive to the culture. We changed it. It's true. We have new residents. They had a different focus of what they wanted the facility, how they wanted the facility decorated. So, and that was what we listened to them. So they dictated how the facility looked. They did, the artwork. We celebrated them by putting their artwork up, and that was really the easiest way to decorate the facility was through their artwork. Once we had police department looked to make sure we had gang signs on the artwork, and we really did. I did, because they're like, no, that's a gang sign. Those are. Resident did a picture. It was somewhere these gorgeous beads, and the officers were like, yeah, you know that was correct.
And it's,
Right. So
we also, in my place, two things. We had one mother, Chinese, that asked me to put, this was during COVID, so she wasn't allowed to go into the residence rooms. It was still in COVID, but it was deep in COVID. And she had a little Buddha that she wanted me to put up right above her bed. She said it would bring good luck and it would take care of her. Of course, I put that right up. We had another for this my little 4-year-old darling. We asked the mom what we should decorate the room with, and she asked us to put up pictures of butterflies and things. Something that was obviously, for her, that was something important. So we took pictures of all sorts of butterflies, we pasted them all around her bed so she could see them. It's decorating and doing the things that are culturally appropriate for them.
this just goes more into our personal environment. And this is spiritual environment, and that was addressed upon a lot. Holidays that we celebrate, never thought it was like again.
Stories are so well.
So this is really important for especially for holidays and for religious beliefs, even how we celebrate birthdays, because again, Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't celebrate birthdays. And birthdays are really big, usually in a nursing facility, to celebrate birthdays, so it's important. All right. So the physical environment, again, just giving ideas and suggestions. Okay. So an important aspect of cross-cultural competency is not so much what we learn about other people, but what we learn about ourselves and our reactions to other people. So this was Dr. Terrell. And what culture or communities do we belong to? shared with my family. I was born here, but I consider myself my cultural background is Haitian. People say, "What's your race?" I say I'm African American. But then when people ask me about my culture, I say Haitian, and the reason I say that is because I grew up with. So when I went to school, I learned that other people eat this, but that's not what I eat at home. Rice and beans, plantains, real, like these are the terms, and I'm like, oh, not everybody eats this. But that until I went to preschool, I didn't know. That's when I had my first hot dog. My mother didn't make hot dogs, but we don't have that. She didn't know what that made. So she assimilated more, because when she had me after only being for a year in this country, so she wasn't aware of a lot of the American food, hot dogs and hamburgers, barbecue. That's what I expect. When I do a barbecue for my family, so I married a man who was born and raised in Jamaica and came here when he was 13. When I got married, I realized I did the barbecue, we had the housewarming after we got married, everybody come over, my family, his family, hot dogs and hamburgers, no one ate it. They're like, where's the food? Where's the bill is going with these burgers? You would have thought that like they walked into a barbecue with all the, I'm like, where's the food? But they all, my mother-in-law and all of her sisters, her 4 sisters, they then true style, fashionably late or culturally late. They came in with trays. There was curry goat, there was oxtail, there was rice and peas, there was, and then everybody's like, oh great, the food is, oh what's it, oranges? And you're like, oh, I had chips, I had potato salad, macaroni salad. And that was what people, and I felt horrible because they kept, oh, there's no food yet, we're too early. Oh my God! But culture, Caribbean culture, Jamaicans and Haitians were like, this is the yeah, and we have potato salad, but it's usually yellow. Mine was white. And so that was like, I don't know, that's the American thing when we said that the American potato salad. So I just had to laugh about it and think this is culturally, and from now on, when I do barbecues, there's no hot dogs and hamburgers. Because no one wants it. It's just, so I'll just make that for Chris and I another time. We're just doing like our own thing in the backyard together. So when we're doing a family barbecue, I can't have this kind of food. But there's no food. Everybody walks in. I'm too early. They didn't bring out the food. So, yes, so that's my story about my culture. So pretty gentle spot because he has to present it.
Well, I mean, my culture, you know, my story, I was born in Texas, I'm an Army brat, but my family liked to travel a lot. So I got to see a lot of culture when I was a kid. I don't know, they made friends with everybody. I don't know how, but we had friends in Kansas. I was able to go on a trip that was called Wagon Toe, where for a few days you traveled like you were the Old West. And in covered wagons, and at night they would circle the wagons, and they even had a fake guy where they would come in with the bandits with their things and kidnap people, and it was really cool. But it was awesome. I was a little kid. I was riding like a donkey. But we met this family, and we then went back to their farm, and I learned the farm life, the farm culture, which was completely different. I went to the 4-H fair, and this kid is showing his prize cow, and I'm like, he won, and I'm like, this is so exciting. You must be so proud of your cow, and this, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna sell the cow, and I was mortified. I'm a kid from New York City. What do I know about how steak is, you know, produced? And culture shock, if you want to say culture shock. My dad to this day still tells a story of my face and how could you possibly, because right, you know, my sister became a vet, so we've always had pets, you know, I've had pets, every pet you can imagine. So for me, it was a pet cow. I would have parading this thing around town, like, look at my pet cow, and he's selling it tomorrow for beef. So it's amazing the culture that and I'm lucky to have these stories and these opportunities that I got to see all these different cultures. My parents got into Native American art. They have a wall just filled with Native American art and kachinas and pottery. And I now know everything about the chinas and pottery from listening to them, and my sister and I have already picked which ones we want and don't want. So I don't, it made me appreciate culture at a young age. And that's, I'm thankful for that I was growing up in that environment. I don't know if anyone else wants to discuss their cultural history.
I'll share for my daughter, because when she was growing up, my mom lived with us. She had grandma in the house all the time. And she would go to her friend's house and she would say, "Where's your grandma?" Because she didn't know that wasn't the norm to have your grandma. But she didn't understand why all of her friends didn't have their grandma with them. So I thought that was kind of cool, like that she was brought up in this multi-generational household where she said, "Where's your grandma? Did your grandma doesn't live with you?" She's like, "No, no." I thought that was kind of cool,
Something.
I was gonna say, so I grew up in
Really, you did?
yeah.
Can't tell about the
It's
accent.
the northernmost part of Australia. So, but the neighborhood I grew up in, there was a growing Islamic community and a large Afro-Caribbean community. So like those are very comfortable cultures at that point, but it was still a very it was working class. So growing up, they were still different. Even though we were being exposed to them, they were still in Hungary. But I didn't have much exposure to Jewish culture. So the first time I came to America to work on summer camps with kids from Nassau County, it's like, holy crap, this is like, oh, these people are real. They're not the stereotypes, it's not just Seinfeld. That was eye-opening at 20 years old. Like I've gone all of this all my life without witnessing or being exposed to this culture. And I think from there it's just okay, well if this is real, so are dragons. But like you start kind of that eye-opening moment, that watershed moment, and you kind of go, oh, I want to find out more now, I want to learn more. So I think it's interesting that you're a chef. Because I think food is such a critical element in that kind of cultural embrace of different cultures and just understanding, why people eat the things they eat, the plantain, the rice and beans, and all that kind of stuff. So.
And part of culinary school, I went to Italian kitchen, I went to French kitchen, I went to American kitchen, and I had to work my way through all of these kitchens to graduate. I went to the Asian kitchen, which I loved. Using so super cool. But yeah, you had to learn about all these different cultures and why things were important. And it's fascinating, you're right.
So individually, do you have close personal relationships with people who are culturally and socioeconomically different than you? These are more thoughts. Feel free if you want to blurt out and share. But this is what I, asked, even for interns for cultural competency. The administrative version was very not in depth, just needed to deal with standards. But with students, right, they're relying on us to take them out of their comfort zone, to ask them more and deeper questions. So this is what I do, and I just want to share that with all of you. Do you have the desire, the knowledge, and the skills to integrate culturally relevant considerations, into your work? And that's also a question that Jeff and I can't answer. We're hoping that, as we're coming to the end of this presentation, that this gave you you learned from each other, and thank you for, letting you share stories and your comments, and to take back and think, and, especially those of you who are supervising, where from here, are you going to make any changes? Are you going to implement things? Just going to have conversations with your staff about how they feel about cultural competency in the facility. What are their opinions? Because maybe your opinion as on the administrative level, you're getting more exposure than they are. And they're relying on you to trickle down from you to them.
What positive changes can you make? Not only in your own personal, but also in your units and in your facilities. Every step is a step ahead for us.
Yes, I know ACTRA, I'm on the ACTRA Diversity Committee, and ACTRA is looking to, when I was invited to be on the committee, I said, okay, I'm an ACTRA member, in the committee. They wanted different representation and a clinician, I think culturally I'm represented, and then also being a clinician and an educator. And one of the things was, well, what are you looking for? And we've just been meeting and talking and just trying to, the definition that we saw earlier of the action about diversity. And then they want to know, are we, as an organization, are we representing diversity? And so I guess they're using us, it seems like they're using us as a small panel to ask these questions, and we answer truthfully. And the chair of the committee then brings it back to that. Where we go from there. So I don't know if it's CTRC has told you on the spot, but if you have meetings, if there's a DE, so now it's the DE.
DEIA.
Person,
Right.
DIA person.
DEI.
And then and that person is the chair of the committee, so he reports back to, Stephen reports back to.
So we don't have a committee, however, we did just do a profile study, and we did pull out a profile study of DEI statistics, and it is on our website. So, and that's something that we have not done in the past. So now there's the overall profile study, and then there's the DEI part of the profile study, as well as the salary part of the profile study. So definitely to get a one step further than our recent poll of CTRS.
And it's becoming a big thing, nothing to do with healthcare, but my girlfriend is the HR director at the Central Florida Zoo. And she was just tasked with starting a DEI committee. And so of course I'm helping her with all this stuff, and I've learned a ton about it. You know, she's sending out the emails to get people involved, and she now has 8 members on the committee, and she's gonna have her first meeting in a month, and she has to report back to the president, the CEO, and so it's becoming a big thing. And you know, we're here in the middle of it, we're at the forefront of it, and we can make a difference ourselves.
Let's see if we can get this. So this is a old school, I shouldn't say, it's a video. And it is, what I have found is that there aren't a lot of current videos on healthcare, the practice of cultural competency in healthcare. Oh, where's my audio? No, there's no sound. Okay, so we have this 5-minute video that is not going to give us some sound right now. Oh, on this here?
Now over the other side.
Oh, thank you. Oh, look how it is on. Well, I can always, anyone wanted to see this video that was probably.
Yeah, we can
Yeah,
email it to you.
we can
Our
email
email
it.
address will be on the next slide, actually.
All right, so there's, sorry, there we go. We can always send you the video is embedded in it, so we can send you the PowerPoint. So we want to thank you all for your time. Our email is here.
Did you actually work in a restaurant?
I worked in a few restaurants.
Okay.
I eventually